His smile was always charming, but that night I woke to his silhouette looming over me, eyes reflecting in the darkness like an animal's. When he whispered my name, his voice had changed. Something else was wearing my boyfriend's skin, and I was trapped beside it. Before you invite someone into your bed, ask yourself, do you really know who they are when the lights go out? My story might make you think twice about the person sleeping next to you tonight. Subscribe now to hear the truth about what happened that night. I never believed in monsters until I dated one. Mark and I met at a coffee shop downtown, the kind with Edison bulbs and overpriced lattes. He bumped into me, spilling my drink, and insisted on buying me another. Classic meet cute, right? His deep brown eyes crinkled when he smiled, and something about his laugh made me feel like I'd known him forever. We exchanged numbers, and I couldn't stop smiling for the rest of the day. Our first date turned into our second, then our third, and suddenly we were in that blissful bubble of a new relationship. Mark was thoughtful in ways that made me feel seen. He remembered how I took my coffee, sent me songs that reminded him of me, and always texted good night, even after late shifts at the hospital where he worked as a resident. 3 months in, and I was completely smitten. My friends teased that I'd found the one after years of disasters and disappointments, but there were moments, small, fleeting moments, when something felt off. Like when I'd catch him staring at me across the dinner table, completely still, his eyes focused with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Or how sometimes when he thought I wasn't paying attention, his smile would flatten into something vacant, mechanical. Once I woke up to a text from him sent at 3:47 a.m. I can't stop thinking about your heartbeat. Romantic, I told myself. Just romantic. I dismissed these moments as quirks or signs of his analytical mind. After all, doctors see the world differently, right? Maybe he was just more aware of biology, of our fragile human forms. Maybe I was looking for flaws because happiness scared me. That's what I told myself anyway, when the doubts crept in. Last Friday, Mark suggested I stay over at his place. I want to wake up next to you, he whispered against my ear at dinner, his fingers tracing circles on my wrist. My heart raced with anticipation. It felt like the natural next step, a threshold we were both ready to cross. I packed an overnight bag, trying to calm my nerves. I never imagined that crossing that threshold would mean leaving humanity behind, or that the Mark who went to bed with me wouldn't be the same one who woke up beside me in the morning. Mark's apartment was exactly what you'd expect from a medical resident. Minimalist and tidy, with medical textbooks stacked neatly on the coffee table. He'd made an effort that night, though. Candles flickered across the countertops, and the scent of the pasta he'd cooked lingered in the air. We ate on his balcony, the city lights stretching below us like fallen stars. His hand reached for mine across the table, warm and steady. This was why I'd fallen for him. These small, perfect moments that felt like snapshots of a future I could actually see myself in. Later, tangled in his sheets, our bodies pressed together, I felt a strange sense of completeness I'd never experienced before. Mark's breath was warm against my neck as he whispered, "You feel like home." I fell asleep with his arms around me, feeling safer than I ever had. That's the cruel irony in all of this. How completely safe I felt in that moment with something that wasn't entirely human. I'm not sure what woke me, a sound maybe, or just that inexplicable sense that something wasn't right. The digital clock on his nightstand read 3:17 a.m., its red numbers casting an eerie glow across the otherwise dark room. The space beside me was empty, the sheets cool. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw a figure standing in the corner of the bedroom, perfectly still, unnaturally so. Just watching. Mark? My voice sounded small in the darkness. He didn't move for several long seconds. Then slowly, his head tilted slightly, like he was trying to remember how a human head should move. "Just getting some water," he finally said, but his voice had a hollow quality to it, like it was coming from somewhere deeper than his chest. He walked to the bed with movements that seemed too fluid, too deliberate, each step precisely measured. When he slid back under the covers, his skin was cold. Not just cool from being out of bed, but a deep, penetrating cold that made me flinch. "You okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual despite the hammering of my heart. "Never better," he replied, pulling me closer. His heartbeat against my back seemed different, slower, with a strange cadence that didn't sound quite human. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that my imagination was running wild in an unfamiliar place. But as I lay there pretending to drift back to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was holding me wasn't the same man I'd fallen asleep beside. I forced my breathing to deepen, feigning sleep while every nerve in my body screamed to run. Because deep down, I knew something had changed in that room. And somehow I understood that letting Mark know I'd noticed might be the most dangerous thing I could do. I must have drifted off despite my fear, exhaustion finally winning out over adrenaline. When I opened my eyes again, the room was bathed in that strange pre-dawn glow. Not quite night anymore, but not yet morning. And Mark was watching me. His face hovered inches from mine, eyes wide open and reflecting the dim light like a cat's. Two perfect silver discs staring unblinkingly into mine. I froze, unable to even breathe as those inhuman eyes studied me with cold curiosity. "You're so beautiful when you sleep," he whispered, but his voice had changed. It still had Mark's timbre, but beneath it ran something else. A subtle echo, as if two voices were speaking in perfect unison, slightly out of sync. His hand brushed my cheek with movements too precise, too fluid. "Your pulse quickens when you're afraid," he noted, pressing two fingers against my neck. "Is it me you fear, or what you're beginning to understand?" I forced a smile, fighting every instinct screaming inside me. "Just startled," I managed to say. "You scared me, watching like that." I needed to appear normal, unaware. Something told me my survival depended on it. He smiled back, but the expression didn't reach those reflective eyes. "I'll make us breakfast," he said, sliding out of bed with the same unsettling grace. As he stood, I noticed markings on his back that definitely hadn't been there before. Intricate patterns that seemed to shift beneath his skin like dark water. They disappeared as he pulled on a t-shirt, leaving me questioning if I'd actually seen anything at all. In the kitchen, I watched him prepare coffee with mechanical precision. His movements were efficient but wrong somehow, as if he was wearing Mark's body like an ill-fitting suit. Occasionally, his head would tilt at that unnatural angle, like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. I clutched my coffee mug, noticing how my hands trembled. What was happening? Was I losing my mind, or was the man I'd been falling in love with actually changing? That night, I pretended to fall asleep early, watching through barely open eyes as Mark paced the bedroom. Around midnight, he began speaking in his sleep, but it wasn't English or any language I recognized. The sounds were guttural, ancient, with rhythms that made my skin crawl. I recorded it on my phone, hidden beneath the pillow, knowing no one would believe me without evidence. I laid there for hours, planning my escape while trying to appear peacefully asleep. Whatever was happening to Mark, or whatever had replaced him, I needed to understand it before it realized I knew. Because with every passing hour, less and less of the man I knew remained in those reflective eyes that never seemed to close anymore. I made an excuse the next morning, a work emergency that couldn't wait. Mark's face remained perfectly neutral as I gathered my things, but something flickered behind those eyes when I kissed him goodbye. Had I imagined the slight tensing of his muscles, as if he was restraining himself from what? I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd narrowly escaped something terrible. Once safely back in my apartment, I locked the door and collapsed. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and played back the recording from the night before. The strange language sounded even more unsettling in the daylight, rhythmic and ancient, with sounds no human throat should produce. I Googled "boyfriend changed overnight," expecting nothing but relationship advice. Instead, I fell down a rabbit hole of folklore about doppelgangers, possession, and something called skinwalkers, entities that could take human form. Most of it seemed like superstitious nonsense, but certain details made my blood run cold. The reflective eyes, the unnatural movements, the ancient language. One forum thread described a woman's experience with her husband of 5 years who suddenly began standing over her at night, speaking in tongues. She claimed his eyes had changed, becoming reflective like an animal's. She never posted again after sharing her plan to confront him. Mark called twice while I researched. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his messages. His voice sounded normal again, concerned, caring. But was that deliberateness still there? That careful precision in each word? I couldn't trust my own perceptions anymore, but I needed answers. I asked him to meet at a coffee shop. Public, safe. When he arrived, he looked completely normal, if a bit tired. "Are you okay?" he asked, genuine concern in his eyes. "You left so quickly this morning." I'd prepared what to say, how to approach this without sounding crazy, but sitting across from him, words failed me. So I showed him instead the recording from the night before, then the pictures I'd taken of him sleeping, his eyes reflecting the flash like a wild animal's. His face remained expressionless as he listened and looked. Then he smiled, that same warm smile I'd fallen for. "You think I'm, what? Possessed? Come on, babe. I talk in my sleep sometimes. Always have. And those eyes, it's just how light reflects sometimes in photos." But as he spoke, something shifted in his expression. The smile remained, but emptiness crept into his eyes. His posture straightened, movements becoming more deliberate. "Why are you really asking these questions?" he asked, his voice dropping to something barely above a whisper. "Because you're different," I said, forcing myself to hold his gaze. "Something's changed. I need to know what's happening to you, Mark." He was silent for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then leaning forward, he said, "Not what's happening to me. What's happening with me." His eyes met mine, and for just a moment, I glimpsed something ancient and cold looking out from behind them. "I'm not dangerous to you. I've never been. But you're right. I'm not entirely what you think I am." My heart hammered in my chest. "Then what are you?" His answer changed everything. "Something that has lived alongside humans for millennia. Something that sometimes joins with them." He reached for my hand, and I fought the urge to pull away. "I didn't want to frighten you, but our night together, that level of intimacy, it accelerated things. I'm still Mark, just more than Mark now." I stared at him, this familiar stranger across the table, and wondered which was more terrifying, that he might be lying or that he might be telling the truth. I couldn't sleep that night. Mark's words echoed in my mind. Something that has lived alongside humans for millennia. He tried to explain more, but his explanations were vague, contradictory. He spoke of a symbiosis, a merging of energies, but clammed up when I pressed for specifics. When I asked why it happened after we slept together, his eyes darkened. "Intimacy accelerates the process," was all he said. We parted with a promise to talk more, but the look in his eyes as we said goodbye felt like a warning. I needed to understand what I was dealing with. The next day, while Mark was scheduled for a hospital shift, I used the spare key he'd given me last month, a gesture that had seemed so significant then, to enter his apartment. I wasn't proud of snooping, but fear has a way of justifying things you'd never normally do. His apartment looked different in daylight, clinically clean, almost staged. I searched methodically, looking for anything unusual. The medicine cabinet contained normal items. His closet was organized with near-obsessive precision. I was beginning to think I'd find nothing when I noticed the edge of a leather-bound book peeking out from beneath his mattress. The journal was old, the pages yellowed with time. The handwriting was unmistakably Mark's, but the earliest entries dated back to 2017, long before we met. I sank to the floor as I read, my hands trembling with each turned page. The first entries described dreams, vivid nightmares where something approached him in darkness. "It speaks to me even when I'm awake now," one entry read, "telling me we can be more together than we ever could apart." Subsequent entries documented physical changes, enhanced senses, strange cravings, periods of missing time. Mark had been fighting something inside him for years. The entity, I don't know what else to call it, says it's from a place that exists alongside ours, a passage from last year explained. "It needs a host to exist here. We share this body now, this life. Most days I'm still me, but sometimes I'm Us. It's getting harder to tell where I end and it begins. The most recent entry was dated just before we met. I'm controlling it better now. The symbiosis is stabilizing. Maybe I can have a normal life, even a relationship. As long as I keep emotional distance, the entity stays dormant. Physical intimacy would be dangerous. It strengthens the bond between us, could trigger a complete merger. I have to be careful. I have to stay in control. My heart sank as I read the words. Everything made terrible sense now. Why Mark had been so hesitant about us spending the night together. Why everything changed afterward. The intimacy we'd shared had triggered something, accelerated a process that had been happening for years. The entity was taking over, completing its merger with Mark. The final pages contained research about the entity, fragments of ancient texts, obscure references to beings that existed between dimensions, feeding on human consciousness. Mark had been researching ways to expel it, fighting to maintain his humanity. But the last entry, written the morning after our night together, contained just 3 words. It's too late. I heard the apartment door unlock. Footsteps approached. Too measured, too precise. I slipped the journal into my bag, my mind racing. Mark shouldn't be home for hours. I stood ready to make an excuse when the bedroom door swung open. Mark stood there, but his posture was wrong. Too straight, too still. His eyes found mine immediately, reflecting the dim light. You shouldn't be here, he said, voice hollow and resonant. You shouldn't have read that. I backed away slowly, clutching the bag with the journal. Mark, I know what's happening to you. We can find help. There must be a way to fight this thing. Something like sadness crossed his face. Mark has been fighting it for years. He's very tired now. His head tilted at that unnatural angle. We're almost complete. Just one final step. He stepped toward me, hand outstretched. And you're going to help us take it. I managed to escape Mark's apartment that day. A flimsy excuse about hearing his phone ring in another room gave me just enough time to slip past him and out the door. He didn't pursue me, which somehow felt more terrifying than if he had. It was as if he knew I couldn't escape whatever was happening. For the next 3 days, I researched obsessively. I barely slept, combing through obscure websites, ancient folklore texts, and occult forums. Mark's journal had mentioned rituals, potential ways to separate the entity from its host. Some required rare herbs and complicated incantations. Others were simpler, but more dangerous. One in particular appeared multiple times in my research and in Mark's notes. A ritual involving salt, iron, and the blood of the host performed during the dark of the moon, which happened to be tonight. I gathered the supplies with shaking hands. Sea salt, iron nails, a silver knife. The guilt was overwhelming. I still loved Mark, or the Mark I had known. The journal entries showed how hard he'd fought against this thing inside him. I owed it to him to try. I texted him, asking to meet at his apartment. I want to understand, I wrote. I want to help. His reply was immediate. Come after sunset. The apartment was dark when I arrived, lit only by candles. Dozens of them, their flames eerily still in the windless air. Mark sat in the center of the living room, legs crossed, waiting. He looked almost normal, except for those eyes, reflective and ancient. You came, he said, his voice carrying that strange dual quality. I wasn't sure you would. I want to help Mark, I said firmly, clutching my bag of supplies. The real Mark. He smiled, a sad, knowing smile. You think you can separate us? Cast out what you perceive as a parasite? He gestured around the room. Why do you think I've prepared this setting? I knew what you'd find in the research. I've been waiting for you to come to this conclusion. I withdrew the materials from my bag slowly. Then you'll let me try the ritual? I will, he said, rising with that fluid grace. Because you need to understand the truth. He approached, stopping just out of reach. Begin your ritual. I won't stop you. With trembling hands, I created a circle of salt, placed the iron nails at cardinal points. I recited the words I'd memorized, ancient and powerful. Mark watched impassively as I completed the preparations, then stepped willingly into the circle. The final step required blood, his blood, added to a mixture of herbs and water. "Give me your hand," I said, holding the silver knife. He extended his arm without hesitation. "Complete your ritual," he said. "Then you'll understand." I sliced across his palm, expecting blood. Instead, a thick, dark substance oozed from the wound. Too dark, too viscous to be human blood. I gasped, nearly dropping the knife. Mark, or whatever he was, smiled. "Now you begin to see." I mixed the dark fluid with the herbs, completed the incantation with a voice that barely remained steady. According to everything I'd read, the entity should have been expelled, leaving Mark free. Instead, he started laughing, a sound that contained no humor, only ancient knowledge. "Your ritual won't work," he said softly, "because there is no possession to undo, no parasite to expel." He stepped out of the salt circle, which should have been impossible if the lore was true. Mark was never possessed. His eyes locked with mine. Mark was never real. My blood turned to ice. "What do you mean?" "The journal you found, those weren't the records of a man fighting possession?" He moved toward a bookshelf, pulling down a much older, leather-bound volume. "These are my true records. I've existed for millennia, taking human form when necessary. The Mark personality is merely a construct, a mask I wear to walk among your kind." He opened the ancient book, showing me pages of identical handwriting dating back centuries. "I created the journal you found, a fiction designed to explain any inconsistencies you might notice. The possession story, the struggle, all crafted to gain your sympathy, your trust." His voice softened. "Humans always want to save someone they love." Horror washed over me as the implications became clear. "Then everything, us meeting, our relationship, was planned," he finished. "I've been observing you for months before our chance meeting. You have something rare, a genetic marker that makes you compatible." His hand reached toward my face, stopping when I flinched away. "My kind cannot reproduce alone. We need a human mate with specific qualities. The process begins with physical intimacy and completes with a bonding ritual." He gestured to the candles, the setup I had mistaken for my ritual. "This ritual? Tonight?" "You manipulated me," I whispered. "Made me think I was saving you when really I was." "Preparing yourself as my mate," he said simply. "The final step requires your willing participation, a beautiful symbiosis of my kind and yours." I backed away, realization dawning with sickening clarity. There was no Mark to save. There never had been. And I had just walked directly into his trap. I lunged for the door, but it slammed shut without Mark touching it. The candles flared simultaneously, their flames shooting upward. "You can't leave," he said softly. "The bonding has already begun. Since that night we spent together, my essence has been merging with yours. Haven't you felt it? The heightened senses, the dreams." He was right. I'd been experiencing strange sensations. Colors too vivid, sounds too clear, dreams of ancient places I couldn't possibly know. I'd attributed it to stress, to fear. Now I understood it was something far worse. "I'll never willingly complete this ritual," I said, backing toward the kitchen. My hand found a knife on the counter behind me. "You already have," Mark replied, his form beginning to shift subtly, features becoming more fluid, less human. "By bringing your blood into this circle." He gestured to my hand, where I'd cut myself on the knife's edge without noticing. A drop of my blood had fallen to the floor, mixing with the pattern of the ritual I thought I was performing on him. In desperation, I threw the knife. It stopped midair, hovering between us. "Remarkable," he said. "Your transformation is progressing faster than expected. Soon you'll understand what we can become together." But there was one thing he didn't know. I had suspected the truth days ago. The journal had inconsistencies, contradictions that made me doubt its authenticity. I'd prepared accordingly, mixing iron filings with the salt in my pocket. As he approached, I flung the mixture into his face. He screamed, an inhuman sound that shattered the windows. I used the distraction to grab the ancient book and run. Knowledge was power, and this book contained his weaknesses, his true nature. Outside, I looked back at the apartment. Mark, or whatever he truly was, stood in the window watching. His eyes reflected in the darkness, but something in my own eyes had changed too. I could see it in my reflection in the car window, a faint luminescence that wasn't there before. I don't know if I've escaped or if his transformation of me is already too complete to reverse. But I have his book now, and I'm not prey running from a predator anymore. I'm a hunter, tracking the creature that tried to claim me before whatever I'm becoming claims me first. If my story kept you up at night, make sure you hit that subscribe button and notification bell. There are more terrifying truths I need to share about what happened after that night and why I can't look at myself in the mirror anymore. Leave a comment if you've ever noticed someone you love change.